Good evening, members and officers and members of the public joining us online. My name is Councillor Kate Salmon and I am the chair of this Overview and Scrutiny Board. I will begin the meeting by asking Democratic Services to read out the housekeeping notice.
Thank you, Chair. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point at the car park in front of the building. Finally, please ensure that background noise is kept to a minimum and that mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on your laptops. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So item 1 on the agenda. Actually, before I begin, Councillor Cox, sorry, but could I ask you to put yourself on mute just for a moment? Are we able to do that from here? Thank you. Okay. So item 1 is apologies. So if I could ask the clerk whether we've had any apologies for the meeting.
We've had apologies for this meeting from Councillor Gavin Wright, and he's being substituted by Councillor Toby Slade this evening.
Thank you very much, and that is dealt with item 2 as well, and welcome Councillor Slade. Moving on then to item 3, declarations of interest. Can I ask whether any councillors have any disclosable pecuniary interests or any other interests that they need to declare on any items on tonight's agenda? I am not seeing any indication. Okay, well, if anything does occur to you through the course of the meeting, then please do indicate and let us know. Thank you. Item 4 is confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting, which you have all had circulated with your agenda. Can I see if we have consensus to confirm those as a correct record of the previous meeting? Any dissent from that? No, I'm not seeing any. Those are then confirmed as a correct record. Thank you. And item 5 is information considered between meetings, and this item is included just to ensure that we have a record of information that's been shared with the board, and in this case it's the item that we're referring to is the Q2 budget monitoring report, which hopefully you have all seen and noted, and we will cover quite a bit of what's in there, I suspect, under our item around the MTFP as well. If anything did arise while you were reading it. Moving on then to item 6, which is our recommendation tracker. This is another item for information, but if there are any comments or queries on the tracker, then please would you let me know and raise them now. Did anyone have any points they wanted to raise on our recommendation tracker? Worth noting that there are still two items that require a follow-up from portfolio holders. Those are still within the initial deadline of the end of December, or close to the end of December, so we don't have an update on those yet. Otherwise, if there's nothing to raise, then we'll move on. Okay. Item 7 is our work plan. So as usual, we have a report on the work plan and have a number of things to cover within that. The first one I have listed is we have a key lines of inquiry document relating to a new item on the car parking strategy. This is following on from a referral from a council motion. And we've included you should all have seen the key lines of inquiry document, and this is included here for us to agree to be included or to discuss whether we want it to be included on the work plan. I wonder if I could ask Councillor Canavan to briefly speak to the document which he has put together, and then we'll take it from there. Councillor Canavan.
Thank you very much, Chair. So members probably will remember that we had a discussion about this at the last committee meeting. And there was subsequently a discussion with the chairs of all of the overview and scrutiny committees about how best to take this forward, arising from which I agreed to draft this key lines of inquiry to look at the different aspects of the parking situation following on the consultation and the development of a strategy. Probably worth saying at this point that since I drafted that, I have received a reply to one of my emails from the portfolio holder, which does sort of set out work in progress in relation to this. But I was hoping that we could still stick with the key lines of inquiry and see if we might be able to move forward to some kind of interim report, if that was possible. I'm hopefully the key lines speak for themselves, but happy to tweak them or alter them if members think it's appropriate. So that's really about it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Canavan. Did anyone have any questions about this key lines of inquiry document? I did have one, if I may, which is just about point D. It's so section 2, the questions to be answered, and the question that is listed as D. Can we undertake an assessment of vacant and underused council-owned land? I just wanted to understand the thinking around that in terms of its usage for car parking. Is that what I'm understanding correctly from that question?
Yes.
Right, good. Just double checking. We might want to just clarify that because I wondered what we were going to do with the land once we'd assessed it. Okay, great. And as you said, there's you've had a little bit of discussion with the portfolio holder, haven't you? Around where we've got to. Lindsay, did you want to come in on suggestions around next steps with this?
Yeah, certainly, Chair. I think from communication with the portfolio holder, Councillor Canavan shared that with me, and clearly things are in train, but it's for the board to determine really whether it wants to wait for finalised policies or ask for that interim update. And as you know, when we talk about how ONS can add value, often engaging before a policy is fully fledged and developed can give you that chance to shape it a little bit, give some ideas, test and challenge around the timescales. So I think just providing that key lines of inquiry document and requesting an update with as much information as is possible on the basis of those questions would be appropriate.
Thank you. So I think the questions for the board are, did we want to, so as Lindsay said, would we want to add this to the work programme, and if so, are we going to ask for an update on progress, or are we going to wait for full cabinet reports to be coming through for pre-decision scrutiny? Does anyone have any views or thoughts on that? No, fine. Councillor Canavan, you I think indicated that the interim update approach you approved of. So that sounds like that's the proposal to be put forward.
Happy to move that, Chair.
Yeah, absolutely fine. And I'm happy to second that as an approach. So if we could just see a show of hands for those who are happy with that approach. All those in favour? Everyone. Yeah, thank you. And I think that was unanimous. So yeah, lovely. Fine. Thank you very much for that, Councillor Canavan. And we'll move on. So the second item to look at under our work plan that I have here is the update on parking enforcement around schools, which we had hoped to have an update, a verbal update from our rapporteur, Councillor Chapman-Law, to this meeting, but he was unable to come along, unfortunately, tonight. But I think Lindsay is going to provide a bit of an outline instead. Is that right, Lindsay? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, the board will recall that Councillor Chapman-Law was doing some background research on behalf of the board to understand whether you could usefully do some more targeted scrutiny on this issue. That being parking around schools and whether we can improve that situation. There is quite a lot of information that officers have very helpfully provided to Councillor Chapman-Law, and we'd like him to give that update if he could in January. But I know from seeing the update that there are examples of good practice in some schools where they've had more positive results. And likewise, there's some ward councillors that have been quite proactive. So I think what was always hoped with this piece of work was that you could bring some value by sharing and promoting good practice, with the hope that it can be developed across more schools than are currently doing whatever that good practice is. So the question now is whether you would like to consider holding a sort of session in your convening role where you invite perhaps some representatives from the more successful schools, perhaps also some of the more proactive ward councillors and some relevant officers to discuss their approaches with the intention of highlighting and sharing good practice. So that is something that we would need to schedule somewhere into the new year. If we were going to have a full report back from Councillor Chapman-Law in January, we'd then need to schedule probably March onwards, because February is your budget meeting. So it's a question of whether the board would like us to go ahead and plan that sort of session.
Thank you, Lindsay. Does anyone have any views or thoughts on that item? Councillor Beasley.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'd certainly endorse that approach. Where this works and works well, gives us an opportunity, I think, to see if we can get others to replicate it across BCP. I would strongly suggest, easy for me to do on behalf of somebody else, but I would strongly suggest that St Michael's School might be one such school to talk to. And they've very effectively installed a school street system which works and works very well and has eradicated most of the problems that have been around for a very long time. It wasn't difficult to do, it didn't cost a lot of money, and it relies, yes, to some extent on volunteers, but it certainly is something that I'm sure the head or somebody he delegates to do so, to actually input information on how they did it and how others might want to copy it.
Thank you, Councillor Beasley, that's great. Yes. Councillor Goodall.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to briefly raise that I think we should take into consideration disabled parents who deliver their children to school, because one of the issues that I've discovered fairly recently is the fact that with car parking on pavements, disabled people who are using motorised wheelchairs can't get past. They can't get off the pavement onto the road because of the curb, and thereby is a problem. But I just wanted to raise that as a note, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goodall. Councillor Macro.
Thank you, Chair. And like Councillor Beasley, I would suggest using Livingstone Road Primary Federation, because that is, how can I say, exemplary example of a safe school street.
Right, thank
Are
you.
you aware of the location?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And that's really helpful for people to put forward their suggestions of where we've got some good practice going on, actually. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
It sounds as though broadly there's a support for the approach that's been suggested. So I think if we invite Councillor Chapman-Law to give us an update on what he's done up to now at our January meeting, and then, as Lindsay suggested, schedule a full item for the board to look at this in the round with schools, with other interested, with officers from the relevant departments and so on, in March, hopefully. That sounds like a way forward. Do I have consensus for that as an approach? Not seeing any dissent. That's great. Thank you. Lovely. Okay. Is that all right, Lindsay? Is that clear? Yeah. Lovely. So I next have a note here about at our last meeting we talked about some issues around planning policy, and we reflected on the fact that the new local plan is starting to get underway, and that we as a board would, now that we are taking back the whole of planning policy and indeed planning into the board's remit, that we would appreciate a specific look at this and a briefing session. So I think that is with Democratic Services to determine a date still, but we're hoping.
I do have an update, but
I'm going to hand over to Claire because she has an update. I'm not going to keep waffling on.
thank you, Chair. Sorry, it was a very recent update. So planning have confirmed that they can make a January briefing session slot, which I believe is the 19th of January. I think the other thing just around that was that we were going to ask board members if there's anything that they want to be covered at that session. So if anybody did have anything, if you could let me know as soon as possible, and I'll make sure that the planning officers are aware of that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Lovely. So we've got a whole date there for the 19th of January. I'm looking at the wrong month. For a briefing session, which is good to know. I'm sure we'll get a proper calendar appointment for that shortly. We were specifically talking around looking at vacant sites and places, sites that have had planning permission granted and no development has been built out. We were talking about that at our last meeting, so that's already on the agenda as something we wanted to focus on. But if, as Claire says, if people have other particular areas around the local plan development that they're interested in asking for a focus on, then please let us know. Okay. Did anyone have anything they wanted to raise now on that? Or you can just go away and think about it.
Oh, I suppose one of the most, sorry, I'll use my thing. One of the obvious things is the housing numbers, achieving the housing targets, and also how much of that will be affordable housing. I think that's quite a big, important topic, and really quite a major reason why we're doing it again. So I think it makes sense for that to be one of our focuses.
Absolutely, that's, as you say, very key to the new local plan development, isn't it? Councillor Rice, you have your hand raised.
Hello. Yes, thank you. I have already emailed the local plan team, but I thought it would be helpful to raise it now. A suggestion I put forward to them was more a workshop, so I'm not sure it would fit into this session, but it was about bringing experts along and answering the question of, with the new local plan, what could we do to solve homelessness, congestion, and affordable housing, and to allow experts to answer that and then put forward some suggestions to us. And that would be ideally a workshop that was open to all councillors, so that we could see what could be actually achieved if we were really ambitious with this local plan. But I have so it was just to see if anybody had any thoughts on that. But I think it probably would be a separate session from the briefing that you're mentioning.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Rice. Councillor Dedman.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, well, just a query about who will be the experts, because I'm very conscious that the experts are actually the people that build the houses. I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you. Yeah, it's fair. Councillor Trent.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think the most important thing that we need to secure within that discussion, and where we require people that perhaps have overseen a system that works, and that's actually making sure that we get a higher proportion of affordable housing. And I know that in some parts of the country, some councils have achieved much better results than most other councils do. And whether there's actually anyone from any of those councils, and I can't think off the top of my head which ones they are, but any that have seen as leading the way and I think some London councils come within that category, then perhaps hearing from them and how they actually achieve that is very important, because over and over again, you know, way back the last local plan, we set a target of 40%, even tried it on to get to 50%, but 40% is where we settled. We've ended up getting barely 10%. And the developers obviously know how to get round that side of it, but in some areas it's worked really well. And the developers seem to have been happy with the situation. I was talking to one in my year as mayor who had been involved in a London borough where they achieved a high proportion of affordable housing as part of a bigger scheme. And you know, the guy was very positive about the relationship they built with the local council. And so there's got to be good practice out there that we can learn from and maybe feed into the local plan, because otherwise, you know, we can have the best will in the world, as we did last time we were discussing a local plan, or our predecessors were discussing a local plan. Certainly in Poole, we were quite ambitious in what we were looking for. And we just end up, you know, there's always the, I'm trying to remember the right term, but sort of affordability or as a developer, viability and stuff like that. And that always defeats us. And I really think we need a strong policy that can stand up to that kind of challenge. And I think that is the single most useful expertise we could use, because you know, you could build lots and lots of houses and there'll be holiday homes if you're given half the chance. And we really need to make sure that we actually build for local people for actual needs. So
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Trent.
any expertise would be welcome in that direction.
Yeah, and I'm hearing that loud and clear, that that's a particular area of interest. Councillor Aiken had touched on it as well. So I think we should put that forward for the briefing session. I think in terms of bringing people in from outside, we probably can't do that for the briefing, because we're only talking about a few weeks into the new year. But we have got as well coming up, starting sort of now, is our looking ahead, our work programming for the year, or 18 months hopefully ahead, the rest of the term of this council. And I think it seems quite likely to me that the board will want to take quite a strong interest in the development of the local plan, and perhaps plumb in a series of topics around that. And I think that viability could well be one area we could spend a bit of time looking at. So that might be something to take forward through the work programming that we're going to be doing over the next couple of months as well. Yeah, thank you. Okay, was there anything else people wanted to comment on the local plan in terms of specific areas of interest for the briefing that we're looking at in January, or should we move on? That's been helpful. And if you do think of anything, I think we can pass that through to officers after the meeting. Thank you. So I have down to talk about our approach to the budget scrutiny meeting, which is on the 2nd of February, just briefly. Just to let you know, the proposal is that we will invite the relevant corporate directors to the budget session, allow yourselves to ask questions. And the suggestion is that we try to sort of focus, as we've agreed through in this board in the past, to have the resident experience lens, to really focus on the resident impact of the budget. So thinking about, you know, what questions we might want to ask about how proposals in the budget are going to impact our residents in the most obvious ways, in the most significant ways. So that was just a note really for you, and a sense check. If anyone thinks that's an absolutely terrible idea, please say. Councillor Denman.
Oh, yeah.
I hope not.
No, I didn't catch what you said, Chairman. You're inviting the portfolio holders.
Well, yes, so the portfolio holder will be here anyway for budget scrutiny, but the corporate directors as well.
Yeah, okay, but as long as the portfolio holders are here.
Yes. I am assuming that the portfolio holder is a given for that one. He is online, so I think he'd say if there was an issue. So any thoughts on that? Does that sound okay? We'll move on. And then finally on the work plan, just to note, there was an item that was scheduled for this meeting on the winter gardens. It's a report that's tracking. It's an item tracking the cabinet report. That cabinet report has now been shifted to February, and that presents us with a little bit of a problem because if pre-decision scrutiny is required on that, it would now have to come to the budget scrutiny meeting, which is less than ideal because usually we would set that meeting aside purely for the budget. So there is a proposal that we could ask officers to include as much information as they can give us on the winter gardens in January under the regeneration item that's on the agenda. So there are two possibilities. We could do that, and then so we wouldn't have a full cabinet report to scrutinise, or we could have a full cabinet report, but it would have to come to budget scrutiny. So I just wanted to take the temperature really and see which of those options people preferred. Did anyone have any strong views on which way forward that it would be better to go with that item? I'm not seeing it. Councillor Beasley, please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I certainly think it should not come to the budget opening and scrutiny meeting because it simply won't have enough time allocated to it. It's important that that meeting is a one-item agenda, and I'm sure that members who've been through that experience before would agree with that. And I think, judging by your reaction, you probably do too. I do think, though, that the report itself, as we were promised, I believe, I seem to recall the leader of the council promising me that it would come back by December. And so therefore, further delay, unless it can be easily justified, isn't welcome. If there's good reason for that delay, and I can think of one reason, but that's pure speculation, then obviously we would prefer to have the full report in a position where we can ask the relevant questions and debate what's in it, rather than having the promise of something that's some way over the horizon. I wouldn't want it to come to us prematurely, in other words. That would be a mistake, and it would just mean that we'd have to go through the whole process again at a later date. So I think the options are very much around its preparedness. So is it likely to be fully prepared by the earlier date? If not, could we have a guarantee of a date sometime after our budget overview and scrutiny meeting when we can devote sufficient time to it and actually flesh out the detail?
Okay, so just to be clear, as I understand it, it is on the agenda for Cabinet in February, which means that the only meeting that we could be sure to get the full report for would be the budget scrutiny meeting of this board, which is, as you say, and I agree, not something we really want because we want that meeting to focus on the budget. So the options on the table, as I understand it, are we have the full cabinet report to scrutinise at budget scrutiny, which we don't really want, or we have a less than full report at our January meeting, but it won't be the full cabinet report because that won't be ready. Lindsay, I don't know if you wanted to. I'm just going to check that I'm getting that right. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Through you, Chair, I agree. We're not aware of any movement on the cabinet timescale, though of course we can go back after this board meeting and double check. But I think it's full report in February, which, as you said, is not ideal, or a verbal update on progress as far as they've got in the January regeneration update.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Canavan.
I was just going to propose the latter of what Lindsay just said, that we seek to get an updated report in January and try and get as much information as we possibly can by that date, understanding it might not be complete, but nevertheless it will give us hopefully a bit of insight as to where that's going, and we try and do that in January rather than trying to pack it into the budget scrutiny in February, which I agree with Councillor Beasley would be less than ideal.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I agree as well. I prefer that approach. I think it is regrettable that we are not going to be able to have the full cabinet report for this one, because we had expected to have that. But given the two options in front of us, I think that's the better way forward. If the board is happy with that. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Right.
Could you just go back to Lindsay on the budget workshop, on the work planning workshops? Just to say something.
Yes.
Thank you.
Lindsay, did you want to come in on work programming at this point?
Yeah, just a very quick plug, if I could, Chair, to say that we have been speaking with all the chairs and we're planning to arrange some work planning workshops so you can do an annual work plan in February. So we will be communicating around dates with you soon. But in the next few weeks, we'll be sending out emails trying to gather topics, spreading the net widely and including councillors to see if there's any topics that they want to suggest for scrutiny over the next 12 to 18 months. So I think all chairs were in agreement that they would really appreciate topics sort of as fully fleshed as possible in terms of we ask councillors to complete the scrutiny request form. So as much detail as councillors can provide so that you can make a good assumption of what is being asked through the scrutiny, and just to look out for that. And councillors, please be proactive and send your topics in. Any ideas that you have, that would be brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Okay, moving on then to item 8, and that is public issues. I don't believe that we have any questions or statements from the public for this meeting. No, that's fine. Thank you very much. In which case we will move on straight on to item 9, which is the community governance review. I'm just going to note before we start, or remind members that general dispensation has been issued by the monitoring officer to all councillors for consideration of this item. So this we have here tonight Councillor Walters, who's the chair of the Community Governance Review Task and Finish Group, and also Richard Jones, Head of Democratic Services, and I gather we also have Councillor Ricketts here to support, and between you are going to lead us on this and give us a bit of a presentation on this report. If I can hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. After full council voted to move forward with the creation of town councils for Broadstone, Bournemouth and Poole, the CPR Task and Finish Group was reconvened in order to help build out the draft budgets for these new councils. We now have a legal requirement as a council to approve these draft budgets and the precepts in time for the new councils to be set up. These budgets include current costs for the Charter Trustees, existing civic commitments, allotments and set-up costs. However, it was decided that outside of some grants that these councils may wish to give out to local groups, it is not for anyone at BCP to decide what these councils may wish to do. They have some additional money if they wish to do other things, but it was agreed that they probably would not have the bandwidth outside of setting up the council in the first year to do much more than sign off a few things, agree on constitutions, make some changes to that, and then maybe give out some grants that they don't have to think too much about over the year. The report and the appendix were unanimously supported by the Task and Finish Group. Councillor Vanessa Ricketts, an experienced clerk, was drafted into the Task and Finish Group to give her real-world experience on setting lower-tier authority precepts, and is here tonight to help answer any questions alongside myself and Richard Jones. The next stage of the process will be the creation of shadow councils for the 3 new councils to sign off on draft financial regulations, hiring clerks and approving a draft constitution. It is worth noting that these new councils can completely ignore these suggestions of this draft budget. They don't have to do anything that we tell them to, and everything that these councils decide to do will be down to those elected to serve upon them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walters. So Richard, did you want to come in as well?
If I may, just
Yeah, of
a
course.
correction in the report, and apologies, I've got a little bit of a sore throat, so if you just bear with me. On page 5 of the paper in paragraph 7, the table that lists the allotment sites, Whitecliff and Parkstone is shown as self-managed. That should be managed. It doesn't change any of the figures, it was just drafting out.
Okay, thank you for that. That's helpful. In which case, I think then we will open up to members to ask any questions or raise any points that they would like to. Who would like to start us off? Councillor Canavan.
Perhaps I could start, Chair, by thanking the Task and Finish Group for the work that they've done. I think what they have come up with in terms of the budget is the very basic budget to allow these councils to actually function. My concerns are with issues that are not directly within the scope of the Task and Finish Group, and that is the work that the shadow councils are intending to do or be asked to do. I think I would slightly disagree with Councillor Waters' remarks about not having the bandwidth. I certainly think that's rather pessimistic. I think these new councils will want to crack on and do stuff, and I think we should be able to give them the scope to do it. And I just feel that this budget constrains them. What it says is that they shouldn't be constrained, but they are constrained practically because they can't increase it if they wanted to. We may not want them to, but the fact of the matter is, if they can't adjust the budget upwards, then I think that is a fairly significant limitation. And I don't think it's feasible or desirable for every single thing that we might think of to be allocated to the contingency. I think that's quite a dangerous precedent to set. I think that's there for particular reasons. The other thing that concerns me about this, Chair, is that I really think the Shadow Council should have sight of these budgets, or these proposed budgets. I absolutely get the fact that they've got until October, but I still think they should get to see them as early as possible. I've said this before, actually. So once they're created from the 1st of January, it seems that therefore there should be an opportunity for them to have a look at those budgets. I don't know whether legally that requires that would, if they change them, whether that would require a full council meeting or not. But frankly, I don't think it matters. I think what's important is that they are asked to have a look at them, not least of which because I think there is work they can do other than the issues that have been itemised. I think they could be looking at a framework around SIL, how SIL will be managed in the future. I think it wouldn't take terribly long for them, Shadow Council, to come up with some kind of proposed framework. It would save a bit of time at the other end. And I think it's disappointing, in my view, it's disappointing that we're not as far forward as we could have been in relation to allotments that are, don't want to be too mealy-mouthed about the fact that I just think this thing's been incredibly rushed. But because it's 2026 and not 2027, the elections, I think that has put certain things to one side, which I think we could have been doing in the meantime. So what I would be hoping that this committee might be minded to do is to actually refer these budgets to the shadow councils for them to consider, because I think it's important for the sake of democracy for the elected members in the respective areas to have sight of that, to have a discussion about that, and to make whatever recommendations or suggestions they see fit in terms of proposing any alterations to that for the new council when it's formed to consider. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Canavan. Councillor Waters.
So
Richard,
I think
overview.
what I'll do, because maybe I didn't do a good enough job in explaining quite the amount of work that these councils will have to do in the first year that will take up most of their time, I might ask Vanessa to kind of talk through just quite how much work they need to do, and just to show that we we don't really have much time to do much else.
Thank you for the hospital pass. Right, so first of all, the councils are going to have to establish all their policies. Town parish councils normally have around 40 to 60 policies that they have to develop, and they have to be approved by full council. These are then reviewed each year, and can be anything from a seat policy, a memorial bench policy, through to obviously your essential ones such as GDPR, freedom of information. There's a whole raft of policies that go with town and parish councils, and so you're going to be very, very busy doing that. There are of course going to be projects that people want to do, but they've got to be agreed, and you can't start looking at projects piecemeal. You need to develop a corporate plan which sets out the vision of the council and what it wants to do. And that's certainly not for the shadow council to do, that's for the elected members to do. You're also going to want to, with that corporate plan, bring in your yearly work programmes so you have your, say, 5-year corporate plan, and there'll be a yearly work programme that you'll want to work to ensure that you're meeting all those objectives of the corporate plan. You're also going to be looking at your neighbourhood plans, setting up your steering groups. These things all take time. You know, if you're meeting every month as a council, you've only got 12 meetings. You've got 40 to 60 policies to get through in this time, which have to be agreed by council. They can be developed by a policy committee, but your policies need to be approved at council. You've got to set up your committees. You're also going to have to look at your medium-term financial plan as well, which will dovetail into your corporate plan and your action plan. That way you'll know what you're going to be wanting to set your precept at for future years. Don't forget that this first year is seeing a 6-month general reserve set up. And the reason for this is that audit, our internal and external auditors for town and parish councils ask that you have between 3 and 9 months of general reserves for town and parish councils. And the reason for this is because town and parish councils rely on the principal authorities to be able to pass their precept on. Precepts are passed on at the end of April and at the end of September, so in two payments. If, heaven forbid, your principal authority goes into administration under section 114 notice, then it may not, the council may not be able to meet that commitment to pay that sum at that time. So that is why you need to have the reserves so that you can continue to function as a town council, pay your staff, pay your rent, pay everything else that you need to pay. And that's why you have those general reserves. But in the second year, that 6 months general reserve won't be needed again because you've already got it. Hopefully you haven't had to dip into it. So half of what you're looking at in your precept now can then, if you wanted to keep the precept at the same level, be allocated to your projects, which you will have decided upon during that first year. So I hope that gives you a bit of an outline of how busy you're going to be.
Thank you, Councillor Ricketts. That's helpful. Councillor Walters.
Yeah, and just I wanted to kind of talk through the complexities of doing that, just to outline how difficult it's going to be to achieve anything else outside of that. In terms of, you know, wanting us to be a little bit more ambitious, it's not for us, it's for those town councils. Regarding giving the shadow councils sight of the budgets, we are the shadow councils, so we've been given sight of these budgets a month and a week in advance of the shadow councils being set up. Ultimately, these budgets don't matter because anything that you agree to do as a shadow council can be ignored by the town council upon its creation. So effectively, what you'll have to do is get 42 Bournemouth Charter Trustees, if we're talking about Bournemouth, in a room, get them to debate between now and Christmas what that budget should look like, come back to full council probably before Christmas, and then vote on it through full council. Because we need to hire, we have to hire a clerk for each one of these councils prior to their creation. Clerks tend to have a very, very long notice period. So unless we've got this budget signed off in December, we don't have enough time to hire, recruit for these jobs, interview enough people, get councillors on the shadow council to interview them, get them through their entire notice period, and then get them started ready for the 1st of April. So I think the shadow cabinet can do things maybe outside of what we've specifically said. Should that involve anything to do with the budget, I don't think there's any time for that.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Walters. Councillor Canavan, I think you wanted to come back.
Well, I simply don't accept that, Chair. There is the time to do it if we have the political will to do it, and I think that's what's lacking in this situation. We have a situation here, if we're not careful, where we're going to spend £4 million to set these things up, and they will do precisely nothing in the first year, and that's simply not acceptable. So I don't see why we can't have the discussions that Councillor Walters just referred to in January. I don't see that beyond imagination to be able to do that. And irrespective of what this committee decides, I am giving you notice now collectively that I will be moving an amendment at council meeting tomorrow to amend those recommendations in order that the shadow councils get an opportunity to see those budgets.
Thank you, Councillor Canavan. I have a couple of speakers I know want to speak. Just so for clarification, did you want to put forward the recommendation that you have in mind to the committee to discuss specifically?
I can do. I'll get the wording for you while you.
Sure, I'll take some other speakers and come back to you then. Okay, thanks. I have Councillor Aikenhead and then Councillor Trent.
Yes, so I'm going to disagree through you, Chair, with what Councillor Walters said. We are not the shadow councils. The shadow councils represent the particular areas of each separate. So that is the whole point of a shadow council. So it's not the whole of BCP. The shadow councils are the councillors from the areas where the councils are. I don't see any reason why we cannot give the shadow councils one meeting to check out the budget. I think what the work we've done in the working group is really, really positive and really good. And I'm really happy with the budgets that we've come up with. But then I shared them with the rest of my group, who mostly are from Bournemouth and I'm from Poole. And they came back to me and said, why is this being decided by a task and finish group? Actually, my answer to that is it's a really good idea for a task and finish group to do the detailed work, all that detailed looking through line by line. That is the right work for a task and finish group. But in terms of approving and deciding what it is we have in the end, deciding the precept, which is actually really important to the local people of our area, and not giving a say to the very body that is set up to represent that particular area, I can understand why people would want that. I can understand why, particularly some of the councillors from Bournemouth, who actually feel we shouldn't be having these councils in the first place. And I think that those people who voted for and wanted a council in Bournemouth maybe just need to step back and realise that now we've decided it, we need to start working together, and that means listening to each other. If councillors in Bournemouth want to sit together with other councillors in Bournemouth and agree the precept and then it go back to full council, I don't see that how we should be preventing them from doing that. And I think in doing that, it also gives a chance for Poole and Broadstone to do it. But I do think that it is important that we listen to what other councillors are saying and not just do what we thought in the task and finish group. Now, you might say, why didn't the task and finish group decide to give it to the shadow councils first. Well, the task and finish group didn't have the power to decide we want an extra full council. Only full council has the power to do that. So this is the only way that we can do it. So I don't see that it would stop us from recruiting this clerk. All we're asking is to amend one bit of it that says, instead of agreeing the precept now, we refer it to the shadow councils to have one meeting to discuss it, and then it comes back to an extraordinary full council to approve it afterwards. Yes, it's a little bit more work. Yes, it's not more work for the town council. So exactly what Vanessa said is quite right. The town council can be very overloaded, but this is not extra work for the town council. It's a bit of extra work for us, the BCP councillors, giving those councillors from the local area some say in the precept. And I think it's really sensible, and I feel that we should be doing it and supporting Patrick's idea.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Aikenhead. Councillor Walters.
Just to add, full council voted to give the task and finish group the power to set these precepts. So full council has already made its decision on that. With regard to discretionary spending, in terms of stuff that people can do with this money, there is 634,810 in Bournemouth that can be spent in the first year. There is 609,400 in Poole that can be spent in the first year. That's a fair amount of money that they can spend on doing things. I think any other requests to do anything else, because this is the absolute bare minimum in this budget right now, would require an increase in precept. So anyone in this room that thinks that this should be more ambitious and include more things and wants to explore that would effectively be voting for a higher precept for people in Poole, Bournemouth and Broadstone.
Thank you. Councillor Trent.
Thank you, Chair. I must admit, I actually think that what is proposed is actually ambitious for the potential town councils, and because even of all the reserves and contingencies are left alone, there's still a reasonable amount of money to spend in year one under grants and projects. And there was some discussion as to how much that would be, but there is something there. And I think the worst thing we could do is to decide as a shadow town council, which is effectively the charter trustees, what a council yet to be elected is actually going to do. The basic framework is there, the continuation of things like the civic roles and things like that is built into it, and the way it's sort of set up, there is money available in year one, and that was something that there was some debate about as to how much, and we came to a middle ground consensus on that. But in year two, there's a lot of things that don't have to be repeated, expenses that don't have to be repeated in year two, and suddenly the budget for the new town council becomes quite attractive. I would certainly be very positive if you know, I came out of the blue, became a town councillor, and was sort of confronted with the opportunities that are in that budget. But I don't think that we who are here, who may not be involved in any way in the town council, people might not want any of us around the table in that town council. So I don't think it's up for us to decide that, oh, they just do a project on this or do a project on that. And that's the danger in deciding too much. The information is open and public, and every councillor will have this information to look at and sort of think, well, you know, a little bit much here, or there's not enough there, and so on. So they can make comments on that basis, but I don't think we can actually set in stone what the next town council does. We very much hope that whoever they consist of. They will do things like honour the civic traditions and things like that. It's built into the system for that to happen, but we can't run it for them in advance. All we can do is to make sure that the new town council starts off with a really good quality town clerk. All three town councils have got to start off with a really good quality town clerk and get them off to a good start. Then it's up to the electorate who they actually put running it. And in this day and age, you don't quite know what to expect on that score. So yeah, I feel quite positive about what's in front of us, and I actually feel that it is good news for whoever inherits that town or the town councils. So
Thank you, Councillor Trent. Councillor Walters.
Just to emphasise what Councillor Trent mentioned there, so in the second year, once all of the setup costs are no longer part of the budget, these town councils could keep their precepts exactly the same as they are right now, and that would translate into £1.4 million worth of discretionary funding for Poole. It would translate for 1.5 for Bournemouth and 212,000 for Broadstone. Now, if we break that down into the wards, so in Bournemouth there are 10 wards, which councillor in this room would say that £150,000 worth of grant funding that they could give out within their ward would be unambitious?
Thank you. Councillor Canavan, did you want to put forward a specific recommendation at this point for the board to consider?
So my intention would be to amend recommendation C by adding at the end, subject to these being agreed by each of the shadow councils. So these being the anticipated precepts.
Okay. Yeah. Could we, now I've heard Councillor Walters has said about concern around the timescale specifically for recruitment of clerks, and I think that's clear. Could I just have some clarification if there's any other issues, because we've up to this point been on a pretty tight schedule of decisions having to be made by certain times, and legislation restrictions. Is there anything we need to be considering around that? Is that all right if I ask you that question, Richard?
Through you, Chair, just to clarify, the absolute deadline for council to set the anticipated precepts is the 31st of January. Councillor Walters was referring to the timeline about recruitment and putting that and delaying that process would suggest that shadow councils would need to meet very quickly, and therefore a extraordinary council meeting in January to agree the precepts suggested by the shadow councils.
Okay, thank you. So that does help me. Councillor Beasley.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm supportive of Councillor Canavan's proposed addition to the third recommendation. It's really important that the democratic process is seen to be wholly transparent in this case in particular. I sat on the Task and Finish group virtually for the whole of its life. I missed the first couple of meetings before I was appointed to it. And so I've lived this experience literally at every stage. And certainly I and my colleague, Councillor Wright, have done everything we can to try to make sure that the precept in year one is at the minimum acceptable level. So any indication that that might be increased would be wholly against everything that we have spoken on up to this point. The input of Councillor Ricketts in the process, I have to say, has been absolutely invaluable. Indeed, I was surprised that it was almost, if you like, a bit of a late idea to ask her to take us through the process and what our priorities should be. And we're really grateful that that was enacted, because without that, we would be floundering around making some pretty big mistakes for the future, I would suggest. So we've got that, but I do want to make sure that we keep a very close watch on how this progresses, and the shadow, the members of the shadow town councils are going to have a really important role to play, and they want to make sure that the decisions they're making are the right decisions, if they are ones which actually impact on the level of precept in council tax bills for next year. And so I support Councillor Canavan in his proposed amendment for that reason, and that reason alone, because I think that in and of itself is a big enough reason to make that amendment. I may have one or two questions presently of the paper itself. I just want to see how the rest of this discussion takes place, Chair.
Thank you. Yes, I do as well. Have some questions, but yes, Councillor Walters, if you wanted to come back in.
Just on that, so where Councillor Beasley's come in there and said that he agrees with Councillor Canavan, but he has also said that he wants the precept to be at its lowest minimum. I think it'd be best if we ask Councillor Canavan what he would add to this budget to make it more ambitious, because John, if you're going to support it, this is probably going to increase that amount. So I'm just trying to work out what it is specifically that we're trying to add to this budget to make it more ambitious.
Obviously, Councillor Walters doesn't understand the concept of democracy, because this is what this is about. This is about getting the councillors in Bournemouth, not councillors from Poole, to be given the opportunity to have a say in the budget that concerns Bournemouth. That's what this is about. Not about whether you put the precept up or down. And I'm not going to get drawn into that silly debate. It's about democracy. It's about ensuring that councillors in Bournemouth get a say in what is good for Bournemouth, rather than other people from other places being able to do it.
Thank you, Councillor Canavan. I think my understanding of the wording that Councillor Canavan's put forward as recommendation doesn't refer to, he has spoken about making more ambitious, setting more ambitious targets, but that's not the recommendation that we're actually discussing, so I take that point. Councillor Wickett's indicated, so I just wanted to give her the opportunity and then come back to Councillor Waters, if that's okay.
Thank you. I'd just like to stress how important B is in getting the advertising out for the clerks, and I wouldn't want, if Councillor Canavan's amendment is supported, I wouldn't want B to be affected, because any qualified clerk in a position is going to have to give 3 months' notice. We are now on the run up to Christmas. There's not going to be a lot of people looking now to start changing jobs and going through recruitment process. And you should be advertising for, I would say, especially given this time of year, at least 4 weeks. And then you've got that process of going through the interviews, the shortlisting, going through the interviews. You're going to be very pushed to have somebody in by the 1st of May, let alone the 1st of April, if you delay this. So I wouldn't want to see B changed, and I would hope that all members would support that, because without your clerk you can't really function as a council.
Could I then ask for some comment on were the recommendation C to be amended as has been suggested? Would that impact the ability to start the recruitment process?
It might impact how much budget we allocate towards a job, the cost of employment of a clerk. If that shadow cabinet turned around and said, shadow council turned around and said, actually, you've budgeted too much or too little for that clerk, it would stop our ability to add into the job role how much they're likely going to get paid. And most people tend to prefer to know how much they're going to get paid before they apply for a job.
They do. Agreed. Councillor Aikenhead, you wanted to come in?
Okay, I think what we are asking is there actually some legal reason we can't recruit as clerk until we've set the precept? Okay, and all the other bits and pieces around it, may be this, maybe that. The recommendation B says we'll start doing it. If we can't start doing it straight away, then Patrick's amendment needs to also amend B as well. If we have to do that, then it's a different proposal. So I would just suggest that can we just be a little bit clear about when we're speculating about whether we can start the recruitment or whether we actually can or can't do it. So can we start recruiting if we haven't set the precept? Can we do it?
Councillor Walters.
I think we can obviously let people know that we're going to start recruiting, and people could start to get a little bit interested in it. But unless we need to sign off. If you want to make an amendment to this and you want to change C, I would indicate that you take the responsibility for the budget regarding salaries out of the hands of the shadow council. So if you're going to put everything to the shadow council, I would suggest at least taking out how much the recruitment costs are going to be from the decision-making power of the shadow council, so that you can at least start to advertise an exact amount that we're going to be able to pay people.
Thank you.
With respect, my question was for the officer as to whether there's anything stopping us rather than part of the debate. So I just would like to say, is there any rule that says we can't start doing it? And if there is a problem, as Oliver has said, yes, surely we can put something in that says the full council agrees the amount of money for the recruitment of the clerk. All the rest of the people, we're not starting yet. It's only the clerk. So we could put that in if we need to.
Richard.
Through you, Chair, the clerk's salary is based on a scale of charges of salary, and that takes into account a number of factors, and we were advised by Councillor Ricketts in relation to the electorate, the size of the council, but equally the size of the budget. So without knowing, and I'd take an extreme, if the precept was considered by the shadow councils and recommended to be halved, that would have a significant impact on the salary allocation for the clerk. So I think it would be very difficult without having knowledge about the expectation of that budget to actually start that recruitment process and to be fair to any potential candidates applying for a role.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Aikenhead, did you want to come back in?
Yes, I just wanted to say, is there any reason that we can't decide, put into B, that we agree the part of the budget for the recruitment of the clerk? Is there any reason we can't agree that bit of full council? And then obviously the shadow councils will have the power over everything else. But that's not something that it's on a scale anyway. It's unlikely the shadow to be fair to the shadow councils, I'm not really expecting them to look at it and say, oh right, let's just halve the precept. I would expect that they would look at the actual budget, and if they were going to halve the precept, they would provide a budget that shows how the precept can be halved and still operate. Because the shadow council, although I disagree, we're not the shadow council, but it's the same people as us. You know, I think we have to credit ourselves with being a little bit sensible about things, and that we're not just suddenly going to halve the precept and not have any budget behind it, which includes the. So I suppose I would be wanting to ask Councillor Canavan whether he's willing to put something in his amendment that allows us to start recruiting for clerks straight away, and gives the shadow councils power to check everything else.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Aikenhead. Just my understanding of what Richard Jones just said was that there was an impact on the salary for the clerk from the size of the rest of the budget. And if we are going to say that it's up to someone else to finalise that budget, you can see that does then potentially have a knock-on impact. So I think there is something there that we need to hold in mind when we're discussing this issue. Richard.
If I can just come back also on the wording of the suggested change to C, because I think it was suggested, I believe, that it was just adding the word, or and forgive me if I don't get it exact, but adding words subject to the approval of the shadow councils. Just to clarify, in C, I'm actually saying there, or the recommendation is to include it in the reorganisation order. I wouldn't be able to do that at this stage. I think what would need to happen to that, if you were minded to go down that route, is that you would remove the words "be included in the reorganisation order" and insert "be referred to the shadow councils for consideration and brought back to council for determination." Because I think that's the only way you could do that, because it is BCP that needs to set that budget. And we can't set it subject to a review of a shadow council. That doesn't give us a route back to bring it back. So I think that was just that particular point. I think in terms of recruitment, if there was an indication that we could commence that recruitment based on the salaries of the draft budget as set out, we could potentially start that commencement of that advertising process. By the time we get around to and I think we probably have to indicate that it would be on that salary, although it is subject to final approval through council, but that could put some candidates off applying to an organisation that has not yet set its precept, if I can put it that way. And if I can just clarify as well, we are only talking, I just want to make sure members are aware, paragraph 36 sets out the anticipated precept total. That first line in that table is what you are being asked to approve, not any detail in the budget. Just to be clear, it is not for this council to set the budget lines. It is the new council that will set the budget lines within the remit of those precept totals.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's helpful. Okay, may I just go back to Councillor Canavan on what Richard Jones just said around the wording and the need for that slightly different wording just to make the process work. Is that acceptable to you as a proposal?
Yes, effectively we'd be deleting everything after paragraph 35 to this report, wouldn't we? And then putting in something to the effect that subject to these being agreed by each of the shadow councils and brought back to full council. Rather clumsy wording, but you know what I mean. I mean, if the committee felt it needed to add something about ensuring that we could get on with recruitment, we could add something about that not preventing the recruitment of clerks, because I see that as still being able to be advertised at indicative salaries, because as Mr. Jones referred to, these are on a scale. These are what potential town clerks will be looking at the salaries to be expecting, if that's the right word. Frankly, if you didn't advertise on that, you wouldn't get one. I think that's the reality. So there's nothing to prevent us doing that. If you wanted to add that wording in, I'd be happy to do that, which means you can crack on and start advertising them. But just to pick up one point, it wouldn't be the first time in my life that I've applied for a job not knowing what the salary was.
Thank you, Councillor Canavan. Councillor Walters.
Yeah, just on this. So either way, I'm urging the committee not to support this amendment, just because I think it's going to absolutely throw a wrench in the ability for these town councils to organise themselves. I think it's going to massively hamper the recruitment process. It is so important that we get the right clerks on these as soon as possible. Anyone involved in any of the other councils in the area will know that when you have the wrong clerk at first, it slows down. You know, so if we want the councils to be ambitious, we have to have a clerk. You have to have the best clerk in place as early as possible. What we've got currently allows us to do it earlier. So delaying it further will make it worse. In terms of this amendment, though, the wording, I would also ask that we add that if you're going to amend it, it's going to be subject to the approval of a shadow council, that we also need to say that the shadow council, provided that the shadow council gives full council a decision by the 7th of January. So it allows us to actually have a full council in place in order to get this done nice and early. So we in terms of sign off from a shadow council, we need to have a specific date. set where they will do that, because at the moment what you could have is that the shadow council meets start of January, they have a discussion, nothing gets decided upon, and again and again and again you have situation after situation where this doesn't progress. So we need to have a timeline in mind for when the shadow council will have made this decision.
I would just.
Yeah, Councillor Aikenhead, just bear with me. My understanding from what Richard said earlier was that the precept has to be set by the 31st of January. So we would be legally, so we would be working within a time frame of an additional full council meeting that would have to be convened and happen before the 31st of January. So the shadow councils would have to do their thing based on this amended recommendation in time for a full council meeting to make a decision. I hope I'm not missing anything there.
So the wording that is currently set, it would be you'd be asking the shadow councils to approve them, but they don't have to approve them. You know, we as a council would then be in a situation where the shadow councils haven't made their mind up, and we have got a legal requirement to set a precept by January 31st. But as this is now with the shadow council, we've lost our control over it.
I just need.
Okay, Councillor Aikenhead wants to come in.
Okay, so Rich suggested a very good wording which completely satisfies everything you're talking about and says what Patrick wanted, I think, which was something like that it's referred to the shadow councils for consideration before being brought back to full council. And I think that that covers it all, because whoever sets the full council date, that will be the deadline. There's no reason why. I do not know why we're getting so worried about procedure here. All you need to do is set the dates of the meeting, and if the shadow council doesn't come to a conclusion, full council will have to decide it anyway, because there's the deadline. It's not rocket science, and I think we're worrying too much about it rather than just getting on with it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Aikenhead. Councillor Walters.
Just on that, I do think it's worth having the wording in there, because at the moment, yes, you're right, the shadow council could make the decision, but they might not. The vast majority of councillors that are going to be on that shadow council don't want this council to happen. So realistically, we need to have a situation where if they haven't made a decision by a certain date, we then give the responsibility back to full council. That's all I'm asking for here.
That's clear. Thank you, Councillor Walters. And I think there's some merit in making sure that the language is very clear, because it is difficult to stick to language that, you know, resolutions or decisions that aren't really precise in their wording. So I can see the point. Councillor Canavan, I'm just going to come back to you once more. Given that debate that's just been had, we would be wanting to add some wording around that there is a legal deadline of the 31st of January. There would need to be a full council meeting before that in order to meet that legal deadline. So there needs to be some wording that says that the shadow councils get an opportunity to discuss this, and they have to bring back their view to full council by the 31st of January. Are you happy that some wording that made that clear and precise be included in what you're putting forward? Yeah. Well, thank you. That was a yes. Councillor Ricketts.
Can I just also point out that would need to be 4 additional meetings before the end of January, not just the council meeting, but the shadow cabinet, the shadow councils will have to be supported by democratic services, because they have to have proper minutes taken, and you can't have those meetings on the same day, because don't forget that the shadow councils are comprised of members who have, or part of their ward is in there. So you could find that you've got somebody that's required to sit on both. So that's going to be 4 additional meetings for democratic services before the 31st of January.
Thank you, Councillor Ricketts. Okay, Councillor Deb.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to echo something that Oliver said, but slightly change it. You said, I think, something about putting a wrench in the works. It's actually spanner. And my point is, I think this is all designed to put a spanner in the works, and I shan't be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Devon. Did anyone else want to comment on this? Well, hang on a minute. I'm going to take one step back. We have a recommendation, exact wording to be confirmed, but I think we are all on the same page of what it's trying to achieve. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Beasley, great. So we are at the point of, if anyone who hasn't already spoken on this wishes to make any points, please say. Otherwise, I think we might be moving to vote on whether we do, as a board, support this recommendation. So, okay. I'm going to ask then for a show of hands.
Sorry, can we get the wording first?
Sorry,
Oh,
Chair.
you do want the specific wording?
Yes, that
Okay.
would be good.
All right. Claire, how are you
I
doing?
think
Just ask, as a Christchurch councillor, am I involved in this vote? There's all sorts of Bournemouth
In what vote?
sensitivities. The vote on this amendment.
You're a board member. This would be
This is only the
the
board.
board recommending a change to the recommendations going to full council tomorrow. So if this board votes for Councillor Canavan's proposal, then I, as the chair of the board, tomorrow will stand up in full council and say that that's what the board wants to put forward. Okay. Claire.
okay. Sorry, did you want to come in, Richard?
I think it's just in terms of the wording. Sorry, I've got the report in front of me now. I think if I could suggest that I think the recommendation is that C would be amended to read the anticipated precept amounts for Broadstone Town Council, Poole Town Council and Bournemouth Town Council, as detailed in the table of paragraph 35 to this report, be referred to the shadow councils for consideration, and I would suggest by the 14th of January 2026, and brought back to an extraordinary meeting of council for determination.
Okay.
So that gives that 14th of January deadline. And the reason for that is if you work back from the 31st of January is a Saturday. So we would, the latest we could take that anywhere is the 29th of Jan, which is a Thursday. So it's not the ordinary meeting date for council. We have other meetings already committed for the whole of that week. The agenda for that would need to go out on the 21st of January. The week before that is the 14th of January, which would allow time to finalise a report. That's very tight, if I'm quite honest. I probably would prefer another week, but
Yeah.
that's the very latest it could be by.
Thank you, Richard. I really appreciate that. It's helpful. Councillor Canavan, are you happy with the proposed wording that Richard has just laid out?
Yes, quite happy with that, and still open to some additional caveat if members wanted to about getting on with the recruitment or not preventing the recruitment. This I think we can do that at indicative salaries.
Well, thank you. My view is that if everybody, the intention appears to be that from those who wish to see this change, that the recruitment continue, then nothing else needs to change, because B already says that the recruitment will commence as a result of the decision taken tomorrow night. So my view is that nothing else would need to be changed. So are we happy? I'd like to go to a vote on this proposed amendment, or this proposed changed recommendation, and see a show of hands, all those in favour of this proposal, Councillor Canavan's proposal, please.
That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 5 in favour.
5 in favour, and all those against?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 against.
And 7 against, and any abstentions? I think that was everybody, wasn't it? Yeah, okay. So that doesn't pass the board's
That's fine, I'm still moving it tomorrow.
but there we go. Thank you. Now I think Councillor Beasley, you've indicated you had a few questions on other aspects of the report. Would you like to ask those now?
I think that actually they've all been answered in the course of that debate. They were concerning some of the financial issues, which I think we have got to the heart of now. But thank you for reminding me, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Did anyone else have any questions? Councillor Dedman.
Well, are we talking about the actual paper that we've got in front of us? Well, I'm interested. I don't quite understand, and I am now not on the task and finish group. It's page 6, and it's property and mayoralty. On 11, it's that whole paragraph. The budget includes the continued use of shared space for the storage of historic and ceremonial assets, including a strong room, and for Bournemouth to continue to use the Mayor's Parlour at the Civic Centre, which is the bit I don't understand. For what? Because it's not a yeah, for what is my query.
Thank you. Councillor Walters.
Yeah, so I think it's just for the mayor to continue to have meetings there. Basically, what they're doing now is the Bournemouth Charter Trustees, the mayor has meetings there, can use that room, it's just to allow them to continue using that room. In regard to the storage, it's just to continue the existing circumstances of BCP storing the regalia and that sort of stuff, because we don't think that there's enough time between now and then to make to make and budget for a new ways to store those things.
Can I come back, Chairman? So is that going to be a temporary arrangement? Because it also says facilities and community halls could be used for formal meetings for each council as required. So that means that the mayor of the town council of Bournemouth will have access to the Mayor's Parlour, which is in this building, but not for meetings. The meetings of the town council will not be held here.
No, they won't.
Right.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, thank you. Any other councillors wishing to ask any questions or raise any points? I had one or two that I'd written down, if that's okay. I just wanted to ask, paragraph 22, where it states that it's not envisaged any existing employees of BCP Council will transfer to the new councils. I just wanted to clarify around current staff who support the civic function. We do have that, they exist, and so just what, if any, discussion has been had around those roles and what might happen to them, please.
So effectively, I think what we've decided there is that they'll continue to be employed by BCP, and that these town councils will be hiring out those services from BCP in the first year. What they decide to do going forward is entirely up to them.
Okay, thank you. Richard.
Yeah, if I can, just to clarify, that's the same arrangement with the Charter Trustees. The staff are employed by BCP, Charter Trustees use the services and we charge the Charter Trustees. So it will be a continuation of that same arrangement initially.
Thank you. Just checking my questions. So I think, like Councillor Beasley, some of them have been answered through the through the discussion we've already had. My only other question was, and it's in the detail, which I have heard you saying is in the end for the new town council to decide. But I did notice that the Broadstone budget includes a line for Christmas lights, but not the Bournemouth or Poole ones. And I just wanted to know why, please.
Yeah, so Broadstone, because there was no one from the committee on, no one from Broadstone on the task and finish group, we had an input from existing Broadstone councillors who built a budget collectively with the, what was the name of the group? The DAPTC. And they've sent it to us. So we've basically just kind of made it viable in terms of the costings and what they legally had to provide, moved a few things around and then put it out that way.
Okay, I think that helps. Thank you. Any further comments or questions?
I want to hop on the Christmas lights thing as well.
Councillor Aikenhead.
Yes, because I remember our discussion, we had quite a bit of discussion about Christmas lights, and I think it's quite important actually to let you know some of the things that we recognised. Like, for instance, first of all, we recognised that Poole and Bournemouth already have Christmas lights, and we don't want to put anything in the budget that people might misunderstand as being the town councils doing that instead of BCP, because we recognise BCP are going to carry on doing, and the local bids will carry on doing the things that they're doing. But Broadstone, particularly, as you said, asked for it to be put in there. But we did wonder, there was some debate about whether it should be in the Bournemouth and Poole budgets. And that's why there is, on the budget, there is a category which says, I think it's events and projects, which is a fairly large amount of money. And from what Vanessa said about the amount of work there is to do in the first year, it's not likely that there's going to be an awful lot of projects that you're going to do, but it's grants as well. So you might be giving the money to other people to do the projects. And so what we said was that actually for Bournemouth and Poole, we don't want to restrict them in the things that they can do. We don't want to be, as a task and finish group, deciding all the little nitty gritty details of whether we're having Christmas lights or whether we're having a new something here or a new something there or a lamppost or whatever. What we wanted to do is just put a pot of money so that when the town council get there, they can make those decisions for themselves. So in this Christmas lights thing, it's Broadstone that's the exception, because they're a small area, so it's more easy for them to know what they might want already. But for Bournemouth and Poole, we're not saying we can't have it in extra areas where they're not there already, but that's something that in the fullness of time the town council would need to make those decisions themselves. So I hope that kind of helps, because I remember we had that quite a detailed discussion on that.
It does. It was an interesting anomaly to my mind, especially because of the fight that we just had in Winton and Moordown around getting any Christmas lights up. So that was it struck me. So I'm not seeing any other indications. We have already discussed and not voted for an amendment to the recommendations. We should probably, did we want to, as a board, express some support for the recommendation? We don't have to. We can just say nothing at all, or we can support the recommendations. Whatever happens, I'll be standing up in full council and faithfully reporting what you want to do. Does anyone have? We can simply just note it and move on at this point. But if anyone has any preferences, Councillor Canavan.
Move we note it.
Move we note it. Okay. And I get a feel of the room is that there's a consensus for sort of noting the report and moving on. Yeah. Any dissent from that? Right. In that case, that's what we'll do. Thank you all very much. Suggest we take. Well, I say thank you very much, Richard and Councillor Walters, Councillor Ricketts. Thank you all very much for your time and all the information you've given us. I suggest we take a 5-minute comfort break at this point before we come back for our next item. Thank you. Okay, welcome back everybody to this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Board. We are moving on now to item 10, which is the medium-term financial plan update. And we have with us Councillor Mike Cox, the portfolio holder for finance, and also we have Adam Richins, our Chief Finance Officer. So I'm going to ask Councillor Cox to present the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to start off with the purpose and context of the report. The report really aims to ensure that the Council presents a robust and legally balanced budget for 26-27, highlighting significant uncertainty due to the Government's Fair Funding Formula Review and the recent national policy statements. It updates the Council's medium-term financial plan and the impact on the national budget announcements and the existential threat posed by the growing dedicated schools grant deficit, especially the special educational needs and disability high needs block. The report recommends maintaining the current local council tax support scheme for 26-27, which remains unchanged for since April 19. I think the recommendations to Cabinet are clearly set out there. And I just wanted to go through some of the financial position and challenges that we face. The previous MTFP showed a challenging situation with about £8.2 million worth of funding gap for 26-27. That's even after accounting for £12.2 million worth of savings and efficiencies. The councils previously forecast an overspend in 25-26, the current year, prompting mitigation measures like expenditure and vacancy freezes. As you will know, the Overview and Scrutiny members engaged in budget conversations to support proactive engagement and scrutiny, focusing on areas like libraries, youth services, regeneration and public events. But there's been a few important recent announcements and changes, and one of them is the national policy and funding updates. In November 25, the Local Government Finance Policy Statement confirmed a 3-year settlement with new funding primarily for social care and phased in over 3 years. Methodology changes have changed, such as including housing costs as a deprivation measure. And as expected, that will benefit London councils at the expense of county and unitary authorities, including ours. 4 new consolidated grants will replace the previous funding streams targeting homelessness, children and youth, public health and crisis resilience. Council tax will still be allowed up to 4.99% annually, with higher increases for authorities with above average tax levels. With below average tax levels. And the government recognises ongoing pressures for DSG deficits and plans, and will further support those in the 26-27 settlement. Now, there was the big announcement, of course, was the autumn budget by the Chancellor, which introduced what she's called a high value council tax surcharge on properties valued over £2 million. Now, despite the fact that it's called a council tax surcharge, unfortunately, that does not mean that money is going to go to councils. However, actually, legally, it has to. So that will be an interesting one to figure out how they're going to actually manage that, because legally it's a council tax. The council tax has to be collected by the councils. But we believe that they're going to claw that back. The government have also in the budget committed to day-to-day send funding from April 2028 will be taken over by the government. But however, BCP Council will retain responsibility for the accumulated budget. And by my reckoning, at least, by that stage, we could be in a debt of £300 million, which is quite stark. There was obviously changes to business rates, national living wage and inflation forecasts, which will impact our future budgets. And of course, there were some policy changes to do with electric vehicle duty and pension contributions. In terms of our own budget and the MTFP position, funding gap for 26-27 has increased, but we have ongoing work to refine the MTFP and to try and develop further savings proposals. A lot of these savings proposals, I have to say, are pretty brutal. The Council is forecasting an increased overspend, unfortunately, for 25-26, with no resources set aside to cover this, and potentially impacting our reserves position. The pension, the good news is that pension fund revaluation shows a slight improvement in funding levels, but ongoing and back-funding contributions are currently under review. The extended producer responsibility payments for waste management have increased, positively impacting the MTFP, which is good news. But service pressures, especially in social care, continue to drive costs higher. The corporate directors and the budget holders have been tasked with developing further savings proposals, which are being progressed and tracked through a bi-weekly cabinet and corporate management board meetings. The transformation and investor save proposals, such as home to school transfers, are being considered and move forward. There is a restriction on there is a restricted voluntary redundancy process is also recommended, with criteria ensuring that vacancies only occur where savings pay back in less than 2 years. I'm afraid, Madam Chairman, that this is not a good news report, and it's a pretty grim reading.
Yeah.
I'll leave it
Okay.
there.
Well, thank you, Councillor Cox, for taking us through that. I don't know if Adam wanted to come in at this point, or whether we would prefer to move to questions and responses.
Chair, if I may, I think the only thing I would really emphasise at this moment in time is the huge level of uncertainty associated with the fair funding formula. You know, I've seen some numbers and it fluctuates by significant amounts week to week, up and down, based on, you know, the national interpretation, because this is the first time this model has been run, you know, and therefore, if you like, the national institutions that are analysing that model, you know, are grappling with it for the first time, and it won't be until they've seen at least one provisional local government finance settlement that some of that instability starts settling down. So I just wanted to make sure that that is emphasised through this report, you know, and that's really difficult, because I think 6 weeks Friday we have to issue that budget report. So we have 6 weeks, you know, including that Christmas period and New Year period, you know, from Friday, in order to be able to present a legally balanced budget to this council. So quite a huge and significant task in such a short space of time, with a huge level of uncertainty.
Yes, absolutely. Very much worth emphasising, I think. Thank you. I will hand over to the board then for questions or comments. Councillor Walters.
Just a question on the mansion tax, as it's been called. If someone has a second home that is a mansion under that reckoning, do they then pay 200% of the mansion tax if it's a second home?
Interesting question. Do you know the answer, Adam?
Chair, if I may, you know, the government will issue a consultation on the high value council tax surcharge early in the new year, and in that, you know, a lot of clarity will actually come out. The first thing I would emphasise with the high value council tax surcharge, at some time I'm going to get used to calling it, you know, that, is that it is a tax on the owners of the property rather than the actual occupiers of the property, which is what council tax is. So there's the first challenge, because we know who occupies properties, we don't necessarily know who owns those properties. So that's the first thing that we're going to have to work through, and clearly that guidance and an instruction from government to tell us how to go about that will be really, really interesting. But my understanding is the council tax is completely separate to this high value council tax surcharge. So 200% is 200%. But if you then own a property, that's greater than 2 million, then you start paying that high value council tax surcharge. So it's not, if it's a second home, you don't pay double that amount. I don't believe it works that way, but I can't tell you for sure until we've seen the guidance.
Thank you, Adam. Any further questions, comments? Anybody else have anything they want to ask? Councillor Trent.
Yeah, as a matter of interest, how many homes do we have in BCP that actually qualify for this extra tax, which obviously is going to the government? And the other part of that is, am I assuming that we still get the normal council tax income from those properties as we would do normally, and it's a surcharge on top of that that goes to the government?
Yes, and since the council tax is council tax, the surcharge is a surcharge, and the surcharge goes to government. With regards to numbers, what we have to emphasise is that this is a valuation office agency exercise where they will go through, if you like, all our properties and establish what their 2026 value is, and from that they'll deem how many we have within the BCP area. So there isn't an answer to that because they've not done that piece of work yet. They will do that piece of work in 2026, and then they will notify us those properties from which they want us to collect this surcharge. But it's a valuation office agency task. We then become the tax collector on their behalf.
Thank you. That's
So,
helpful clarification.
so just to follow up on that, is it worth saying then that if they are taking a 2026 valuation, you could have a situation where the council tax based on a 1990 valuation, the band of council tax might be different to, so you might get some in a lower band of council tax that suddenly find themselves with this sort of mansion tax. It sounds to me as if it's going to be sort of fun and games for someone and lots of headline stories in the Echo.
Adam.
Chair, if I may, my home councillor is completely right. I did hear a rumour that there was a suggestion that there is at least one property in London that is currently in a band B that would then be charging the council tax surcharge. That's rumour. I can't guarantee it, but those sort of anomalies will potentially crop up.
Thank you. Further comments or questions? Councillor Beasley.
Thank you, Chair. In fact, in reference to that past item, clearly it will be the lawyers and chartered surveyors who will probably clean up in the longer term anyway. So I've got questions on three parts of the report. I suspect they're all really directed towards Mr. Richards, and they're about trying to get greater clarity around certain aspects, probably adding to the pain that we're all feeling about the budget process anyway. So if I could start with the fair funding formula, which is something which, if you like, is in a test period. But the trouble is that the test period goes straight into reality when we set our council tax and our budget in February. And so therefore, as Mr. Richards said, time is very, very tight. And I'm wondering, particularly given that the government won't be giving us that until probably pretty much at Christmas Eve, as is becoming the norm, what sort of contingency plans we might have in terms of changing the position of the council in the light of whatever it is that funding formula gives, or more importantly takes away from us, and what the plan might be in terms of making any representations, harnessing the use of our local MPs, who are in three cases the same party as the government, because it does seem to me that it isn't going to be a fair funding formula as far as BCP Council is concerned, anything but there isn't, it seems to me, also any recognition of the strain and work that's been done through the budget process, not just now, but over many, many years. So that's my first question. I just wondered whether we could hear a little bit more about that first. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Beasley. Adam, are you happy to take that one?
Yeah, I think in answer to the first part of the question, hopefully, and we all know what hope can do. What we have is a prudent position, hopefully, and hopefully when we see that local government finance formula when it actually comes out, then actually hopefully be a little. I said hopefully quite a few times in that statement, didn't I? Hopefully, I'm going to do it again. Hopefully, be an improvement from what we've currently assumed. Hopefully, prudently within that MTFP as it currently stands. So we'll wait and see. But nevertheless, at the moment, the MTFP identifies an £8.9 million gap. And as the portfolio holder said earlier in his introduction, we are working through, as a senior leadership team, working with the portfolio holders, working with budget holders and service directors and corporate directors on the options to bring that back into balance. But my concern with it, as I said, is it is going to be all last minute in the sense that we won't get that settlement to maybe the 17th or even the 18th of December, 18th December being the last day we can receive it, because that is the day that the Parliament rises for Christmas. So we're getting one of those two dates, and then you've probably got 4 weeks, including that Christmas period, in order to agree a legally balanced budget. So a huge task for this cabinet, in light of the fact that this is the first formula time this formula has actually been used. Because it's a 3-year formula, then hopefully in future years you'll have a better view and be able to better financially plan for the second and third year, because you've got that information in December of this year. So that's the plan. Regards to the local MPs, I know there have been dialogue. I know the chief exec, recently met with at least one of them, and had that kind of conversation with regards to what the funding formula might bring for this council. But it'll be something that I think we'll continue that dialogue with them, as we start to see what that potentially means for this council.
Thank you, Chair. That's just I was just hoping to draw out a little bit more of the difficulty that is ahead, and also recognising that all the things that I would expect to be happening through the directors' structure and portfolio holders is obviously happening, as would always be happening at this time in the financial year. And I've just got this really bad feeling about the fair funding formula and the way it will affect particularly councils such as ours in the south of England, for reasons which I think are misconceived, given our history and given what we've tried to do in the past. The second one is around Senate funding.
Councillor Beasley, if I may, Councillor Cox is indicating, so I didn't. I think
sorry,
you might want to come
Chair.
in on your previous question. Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I did. I was just going to accuse Councillor Beasley of having read my Guardian article, which, but I realised he probably doesn't read the Guardian. And where I actually describe this formula as anything but fair, and I've actually said the uncertainty which has surrounded it is really causing chaos to council budgets. So I would like to agree with him.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Councillor Beasley, continue.
It's a rare moment of agreement between myself and Councillor Cox, and I shall cherish the moment for the rest of the evening. And I'll put Councillor Cox's mind at rest. I'm not an avid or regular reader of the Guardian, it is fair to say, but nor do I think Councillor Cox probably is of the newspaper that I read. The second one is around SEND funding, and I know that I've spoken on it before, and I know that we all recognise that is at the very heart of the problems that we face here at BCP Council. And so I won't rehearse, what that accumulated deficit is year on year, and what the interest cost and cash flow and so forth is also. But what really concerns me is the government's announcement and the lack of substance in terms of detail, because that is what I think Mr. Richins and Councillor Cox and everybody else really need to know, because it's all very well and good the government saying that they are going to be dealing with the deficit from 2028, What does that mean? Is the first question, and I doubt we've got an answer to that. Is that the deficit, or what about the accumulated debt that goes with it that we're servicing through the revenue account and through council tax? And more importantly, perhaps, and I'm sure this is occupying the minds of officers and members, is what happens to that accumulated deficit at that point? Does that mean the government are going to take all of that on board? Or are they going to say, as I fear and suspect, well, we'll have a formula from 2028, but what's in the past is in the past, and is the problem of the council. And indeed, the impact of the revenue cost of the interest that's accumulating in order for us to cash flow this accumulating and accumulated deficit is the other one. And I do share actually Councillor Cox's concern that really the major part of this is whether we can make it through to 2028, because given the figures that we've got and the projections that we've seen, it looks highly unlikely that we can, because the figures just don't get to where we need them to. And I just wonder whether Mr. Richins is able to allay any of those fears in terms of what the government actually mean in the announcement made by the Chancellor only a couple of weeks ago.
Yes, thank you. Adam.
I'm not sure I'll be able to do that, in the sense that, just to recap, as of the 31st of March this year, our accumulated DSG deficit was £113 million. Our total reserves were £83 million. So we were technically insolvent at that point. You know, if there weren't a statutory override in place that allows me to ignore that DSG deficit, then I'd be issuing Section 114. I'd have to by law, you know, as part of that process. What we know is that that deficit will grow to £183 million. A DSG deficit will grow to £183 million by the 31st of March 2026. And our reserves, because some of those are earmarked reserves being used for specific purposes, will go down to about 66.5. So we'll be about minus £117 million by the 31st of March 2026. So that's the position we're going to be at the end of this financial year. What the government has said is that on the 1st of April 2028, they will pick up the day-to-day running of the SEND. So the assessment is the annual deficit from the 1st of April 2028, 29, they pick that up and it does not become our concern, which is good. However, we're £183 million and there's 2 more years to come on top of that. And as Councillor Cox said earlier, if you add 70 to 80 million pounds to that, you're going to get over 300 million pounds by the 31st of March 2028. When you get to the 31st of March 2028, not only did the government take on the day-to-day running of that SEND, but that statutory override falls away. So on the 31st of March 2028, unless I hear something, you'll be going, okay, you're forced into that Section 114. However, what they said in the Chancellor's announcement a couple of weeks ago is that when they provide us with the provisional local government settlement for 26-27, which should be on the 17th or 18th of December, they will tell us what the level of support they're going to give local authorities for the historic deficit, 113 million or 183 million, and the accruing deficit over that 2-year period. So at this moment in time, it's too early to come to any conclusive assessment of what all this means until we hear from the government in a couple of weeks' time.
Thank you very much, Adam. And Councillor Reagan had a note that you want to come in, but just because it's on the same subject, my question was going to be, about this time last year, you were telling us, I remember, that we might be unable to set a legal budget for 25-26 because of the cash flow issue relating to the growing deficit and the and all of that. And I think I might have heard a partial answer to that in what you've just said. Are we in that same position again? It's basically the question, or are we waiting to hear what the government say on the 17th or 18th of December, so before we know whether we're in that position.
Are we in that position? The answer is the cash flow issue hasn't gone away. You know, it's still there in the background, but in giving us an answer to setting a legally balanced budget for 25-26, they told us that we could temporarily borrow and we should temporarily exceed our CFR, which up until that point we thought was illegal, but they said you could do that. And we acquiesced to that. Now, what they said is, you know, in that conversation, define temporary. Because temporary could be a day, 2 days, a week, a month, a year. The view they gave is it could be up to 2 years. So I think we're sort of almost in the same position, continuing to acquiesce to what they previously told us around that cash flow issue. But in the expectation, you know, come the 19th of December, all this fog will lift and we'll have clarity as to how this is going to map out for the future and what it means for BCP Council at that point in time.
Thank you. That's helpful. Thank you, Adam. Councillor Aikenhead wanted to come in.
Yes.
Councillor Beasley's indicating. May I bring Councillor Aikenhead in and then come
Chairman,
to
I was only reminding you I had 3 questions.
Oh,
I've
did
asked 2
you?
of them.
I apologise. I will come back to your question, Councillor Beasley.
So I just really wanted to say that I think that I completely have, like everyone else, I have a lot of concerns about all the uncertainty that's happening, and the fact that BCP Council has been just on the edge all the time since I've been elected. I've not known anything else. Even before I was elected, I was going to council meetings. Since BCP has existed, it has been on the edge. But also, I feel the need to just bear in mind a couple of things. Firstly, I don't think there would be any advantage to the government in us not being able to set a legal budget. If we get to the stage where the government are taking over the government don't want to take over what we're doing, because it's not that we're mismanaging it, it's just that we've got a historical situation that has put us in this mess. And I do think that the government know that, and I think that what we should be doing, like Councillor Beasley suggested, is making sure that our MPs are primed and ready to get up there and argue for us if there is a case where we're in trouble. But I do think also that in terms of things like the send problems, the government are sorting the problems out. They're just not doing it as fast as we would like. And I think that we just maybe need to have some patience in terms of allowing them to have the time to solve the problem. It's not just us that have the problem, it's all over the country. I feel the need to remind members that this government didn't cause the problem. They're trying to sort it out. The problem was already there before they got into office, and now they are actually sorting it out. There was no sign of it being sorted out before they got in. They've already committed to taking over the SEND funding, and they haven't said what they're going to do about the historical debt, but they haven't said they're going to leave it with us. They've said they're going to tell us later. And so I think that the word hopefully is a good word, but also I think don't assume just because they're not your party that they're going to do all the wrong things. Sometimes we can all work together with things. Sometimes, and we just need to sort out this mess has been there for a long time. These SEND problems, it's a wrong system. It's a rubbish system that leaves us with more and more debt year after year. It's been there for years and years and years, and now we are going to get it changed. So let's just support the government to do it, and try and do what we can to encourage them to do it faster, rather than just worrying about it.
Okay.
And engage with our MPs to help do the same.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Aikenhead. Councillor Beasley, and then I have the leader's indicated that she wants to speak. Was it directly in response to Councillor Aikenhead? Bear with me, Councillor Beasley.
So, thank you for letting me speak. I just wanted to respond to that because I have a lot of sympathy with Labour members, and how it must be very difficult to kind of marry up what we're seeing the government doing with actually what our needs are as a local authority. But this is about priorities. We know that the government have recently announced a policy around ID cards. We also know that the government have just committed £7.6 billion onto road spend, which brings £40 million into BCP. Now, these are decisions that they're making, and what they're not doing is wiping the send deficit and therefore costing local authorities more money. We will have a £10 million pressure next year. I would much rather some of that money have, or in fact all of that money, have gone to tackling this issue sooner rather than consistently kicking this down the road. There's absolutely no reason why they should be delaying this and continuing with the statutory override when actually that is the cause of our problems. So I think there are two things. There's the deficit, and then I do have a lot of sympathy. It's going to take a really long time to fix the send problem, but there are no easy answers there. I think that, you know, families are really struggling with the system. As a council, we struggle to deliver it. The whole thing is broken, and I don't expect to see a magic wand deal with that in any instance. In fact, it's probably going to take decades to reform. But when it comes to that deficit and the pressure it's putting on local authorities, you know, a £4 billion amount across the UK, which is taking so much money out of public services, that is a political choice not to deal with that. And I think we should be holding the government to account on it.
Okay. Thank you, Leader. Councillor Beasley.
So my third and final question is around the pension fund. And Councillor Cox indicated that there is some good news in there, and much of that is around performance, which we've seen reflected across the whole of the LGPS family nationally, and it's good that Dorset Fund, of which BCP members are a member, is able to benefit from that. The part that concerns me, and I think probably concerns the Director of Finance as well, is about contribution rates and the actuaries who are Barnett Waddington, their view on the variables within that. I'm sorry if this sounds a little bit technical, but it really is important because these are big numbers, and it's important that we understand that there are quite a number of variables that they can use within their assumptions, somewhere around 20 or so, I think, from memory. But the key ones are around their assumptions on inflation, salary increases, and the discount rate, which is very impactful on the cost to the council and therefore to council taxpayers as well. And I'm wondering within there what timescale there is for negotiation with the actuaries, and whether there's anything that I, as a member of the Pension Fund Committee, or anybody else can actually do to help in that process, because what is set then is, if you like, for that moment set in stone and is immovable. And I know for reasons outside of this council that they are taking a more cautious view on this occasion with regard to the Dorset Fund. Nothing to do with the Dorset Fund, but to do with them as actuaries. And I'm just concerned that Mr. Richards may be out there on his own trying to do that, and that I know that he probably needs more support if support is available. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you. Adam.
Chair, if I may, can I just go back to the previous item? I think the Vice Chair said that we had to stop worrying about it. To be clear, I still worry about the SEND deficit. I lose sleep on behalf of the members of this council as to what it might mean with regards to that legally challenged budget, because I've seen how difficult it is to make those real painful, I think the portfolio holder said, brutal decisions with regards to what might have to happen if it doesn't turn out how we hope, you know. But in response to Councillor Beasley's question, just to give some assurance, is we are robustly challenging the pension fund and the pension fund actuary with regards to the information that's provided in that report. It is a requirement not just to accept what they give you, but to challenge it, and that's what we're doing with, as part of this process, and we are linked in with an independent actuary who will actuary to actuary challenge them as part of that process, because I think, as Councillor Beasley will know, it is a very fine art, and what we need is somebody with the skill sets in order to challenge, the pension fund actuary. So we're linked into that process. They've got all the information. I'm hoping, by the time we come to set that budget in 6 weeks' time, we can see a positive impact on this budget as currently being drafted, and hopefully see a reduction in some of those rates. What particularly concerned me was the secondary rate, the back funding rate, because it was that assessment that the overall pension fund was funded to 96% in 2022, but 3 years later it was still 96%, and it was like, hold on, how did we get to that? I spent 3 years paying back funding. Surely that's reduced the funding gap in that period, and there were some clearly positives. But as you said, some of the assumptions around future inflation rates, future pay awards, were quite, I think, prudent, and that's what really needs to be challenged in hopefully to get a more positive impact on the MTFP as presented.
Thank you, Chair. I'm greatly relieved that we are taking actuarial support in this process, because I think that's the right thing to do. And it will have a cost, but it will be cost that I'm sure will be fully justified. And therefore, Mr. Richards isn't fighting this sort of on his own directly with actuaries the size of Barnet Waddington, which would be a difficult task to achieve anything out of. So well done and thank you.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Were there other members who wish to make any comments, ask any questions on this report? I'm not seeing any indication. I had, I think, 1 or 2 questions, if I may. A couple of them have been, my main questions have been answered already, actually. The only thing left that I really wanted to ask a bit more about was if you could say a little bit more about what we think the impact, or what do we know what the impact of the changes announced to business rates is going to be locally. Is there anything more to explain to me, who doesn't spend as many hours as you in the detail of these announcements, to help me understand it?
I think probably, as the paper indicates, the government have undertake a business rate revaluation, as they do periodically every 4 years or so. That revaluation will feed its way into the process and into the overall assessment. Clearly, I think, if from memory, I think they moved to 5 banding rates, compared to what was previously, and that will have, an impact on businesses depending on where they were and where their assessment comes out. So it's one of those things. It was very easy to gloss over in the budget, but on individual business by business basis, that may have a significant impact. But it's one of those. They've got to wait and see where they've been assessed and what impact it might have, and whether there's any tapering or dampening to that impact for them when they get that process.
Okay, thank you. Sounds like more to know later on that score then. Thank you. Members, it sounds like we might have come to the end of our discussions on this. We have the recommendations in front of us. There are 6. And as ever, we can decide how we want to proceed. Did anybody want to propose that we endorse or support the recommendations? Councillor Walters.
Can I suggest that we support the recommendations?
You certainly can. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Canavan.
No, I was going to propose we just note it, Chair.
Okay, so we have 2 different proposals here. So can we take them in turn? Do we have a seconder for Councillor Walters? Okay, I saw Councillor Dedman first. It doesn't sound like we have consensus on this, so could we just see a show of hands of those who would like to support the recommendations in
We
the
don't have
report.
consensus, Chair.
No, I know, that's what I said, we don't, so I'm asking,
I haven't spoken to that yet.
sorry,
I haven't spoken to that proposal at
would you
all.
like to speak to the proposal?
Well, it's not a set of recommendations that I can possibly approve, not least of which is because it talks about the approving the implementation of a restricted voluntary redundancy process to enable delivery of 26-27 savings for specific service-based restrictions. I have no idea what that means. How can I possibly approve that? I don't know whether there's been any negotiations with the trade unions. I don't know which services they're looking at. I don't know what jobs they're looking at. All I know is what Councillor Cox said earlier on, that somehow they're looking at a situation where, you know, if they pay X to somebody to make them voluntary redundant, you know, that money has to be paid back within 2 years, or the savings have to be recoverable within 2 years. That doesn't mean anything to me. I don't know how many jobs we're talking about. I don't think Councillor Cox probably knows how many jobs they're talking about. So it's not a recommendation that I can possibly support.
Okay, I would suggest that this board is your opportunity to ask some further questions about that recommendation. Did you want?
Well, it shouldn't be in there. Why would I ask a question about it? It shouldn't simply be in there.
Okay, okay. Is there anybody else wanting to speak around whether or not we would support the recommendations, or are we okay to move to a show of hands? Okay, so could I see all those in favour of supporting the recommendations in the MTFP report?
That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in favour.
Okay, and any against? We have one. And abstentions. 2 abstentions. Thank you. So we have, as a board, agreed to support the recommendations in the MTFP report. In that case, I think that is the end of our business. So thank you very much, Councillor Cox. Thank you very much, Adam Richards, and to all of you for your contributions this evening. And I will close the meeting. Thank you. Good evening.